solving the mystery, finding the answer. And that's the important thing. That's the compulsion to know the truth, to know what happened. When we get to the bottom, we'll all come around to the other side of you and come up on that side of you.
They've been here a week, and they'll be here maybe another 2, fighting their way through the dense Maine woods. 20 people looking for a piece of lost history, searching for the remains of 2 French pilots and their 1927 biplane, Oiseau Blanc, the White Bird.
The most important thing about a discovery here will be putting the final chapter on the Nungesser Coley story.
In World War I, Charles Nungesser became the most decorated pilot of the Allied forces, and Francois Coley was a navigation pioneer. On the morning of May 8, 1927, the 2 Frenchmen climbed aboard the White Bird, trying to be the first to fly from Europe to America non-stop. They rolled down the same runway that would welcome Charles Lindbergh to Paris 13 days later. The White Bird was sighted over Scotland and 40 hours later over Newfoundland, but then it disappeared. Headlines in New York spelled out tragedy. There would be no grand welcome in New York Harbor.
Dateline Paris, May 21st, 1927. In a moment.
Less than 2 weeks later, Nungesser and Coley were all but forgotten in America as a pilot for the United States Postal Service successfully linked the 2 continents. No doubt Nungesser and Coley would be amazed at the technology being used to find the wreckage of the White Bird. Heat-seeking cameras mounted on this helicopter scan the thick forest north of Machias. Organizers hope the White Bird's engine is exposed enough to absorb sunlight and produce more heat than the surrounding vegetation. But what led searchers to this area to begin with are people, residents who in 1927 took notice of the sound of an airplane. It was a day much like today, foggy, drizzling, kind of cool, only the date was May 9th, 1927, 11 days before Charles Lindbergh made his historic flight across the Atlantic. And on that day in 1927, Anson Berry, a local woodsman, was on Round Lake fishing. People say Anson Berry was the last one to hear the White Bird.
He used to pickle fish commercially, and
92-year-old Albert Mattatall used to hunt and fish with Anson Berry.
he told us that day that he had heard this plane come over, and it was a sputtering, and he heard a big crash.
Fred Dennison was just a boy that day after Anson Berry heard a plane crash.
After that afternoon, later that evening, he went up to clear it back up to Round Lake and looked in across the hills there and see if he could see anything, you know, like smoke or anything, but he didn't, and came back down and forgot about it after that.
So at first, Rick Gillespie and his crew searched near Anson Berry's camp on Round Lake. But then came new evidence, new eyewitnesses, and the search changed locations. The puzzle now has pieces, although still disconnected. But these are the people determined to put the puzzle together.
We're not doing it in order to change history anyway. We're doing it because it needs to be finished.
The search has now moved from Anson Berry's camp on Round Lake and is concentrated on nearby Second Lake. In tomorrow's report, the reasons why the search for Nungesser and Coley has changed locations. Bill Shields, TV4 Eyewitness News, Machias, Maine. Rick Gillespie has spent much of the last 3 years searching the woods north of Machias, Maine, searching quite literally for a needle in a haystack. But Gillespie is convinced that somewhere out here are the remains of 2 French pilots who 60 years ago may have crossed the Atlantic 2 weeks before Charles Lindbergh. Still, no one has ever found a trace of Charles Nungesser or Francois Coley.
They were fascinating guys. They were straight out of the 1927, the Roaring Twenties, the intrepid aviators. They were real characters. And they were also dedicated professional aviators, just like Lindbergh was.
In 1927, few people in Machias, Maine had ever seen or heard an airplane. But on the afternoon of May 9th, on this fog-shrouded lake, a woodsman named Ensign Berry said he heard an airplane overhead and that the engine sputtered. Then Berry claims to have heard a distant crash near the Round Lake Hills. Gunnar Hansen believes Berry was the last person to ever hear the engine of the White Bird.
Ensign Berry, from everything I've been able to find out about him, though he wasn't a pillar of society by any means, I think even the people who disliked him have to agree that he was honest about something like that he would not make up a story.
But in 1970, Ensign Berry's story took a bit of a twist. A hunter found an old rusted engine block, different than anything he said he'd ever seen, in these hills about 15 miles from Ensign Berry's Round Lake. This is right near Second Lake, and it's where Rick Gillespie is now concentrating his search.
I've been coming back every season since. Haven't found it, but I know it's here.
We're going to head back up the line to the blue line.
But like Ray Beck, Rick Gillespie has also come up empty-handed. Even helicopters equipped with heat-seeking cameras have failed to detect the presence of the White Bird's engine. Still, the search team continues to comb the thick woods near Second Lake to see if the two Frenchmen did indeed beat Lindbergh across the Atlantic.
I just know it's here. Just believe it.
Think you can find it?
Hope so.
But few Americans outside of the aviation industry have ever heard of Nungesser and Coley. Even residents of nearby Machias wonder why a search is underway 60 years later. But in Paris, even school children know the names of Coley and Nungesser, if only for their World War I exploits. There are memorials here to the two pilots. But the granddaughter of Francois Coley says the best memorial of all would be for the American search team to find the remains of the White Bird.
I'd like to wish him good luck, and he deserves to find something.
Started.
But will Gillespie ever recover the remains of the two pilots in the White Bird? Well, the odds are against him. There's too little evidence and too much forest. As Charles Lindbergh said 60 years ago, the biplane and its two pilots had vanished like a midnight ghost.
They were dedicated professionals who were taking a calculated risk to do something that had never been done before. The reward for them was death and obscurity. For Lindbergh, the reward was fame such as few men have ever had.
Bill Shields, TV4 Eyewitness News, Machias, Maine.